Let's go to Canberra now and catch up with Social Services Minister Anne Ruston. I want to speak to her about efforts to rein in the country's social service or welfare obligations. Thanks for joining us, Senator. First up, though, just on this skills and training issue and migration, I suppose. We were just talking to your South Australian counterpart, David Pisoni, who's very encouraged by the additional skilled migrants going into South Australia. But this comes at a time when there's 7% unemployment in your home state. A lot of people are going to be a bit iffy about skilled jobs going to migrants when there are so many young people who need training for employment.
Well, I mean, obviously that's the part of the vocational training efforts, both by the federal government and the state governments, is to make sure that the skills that are needed, that we're actually training people in those skills. But what is obviously self-evident by the need for these migrants to provide the skills into South Australia is that those skills don't exist. But also we still remain, particularly in rural and regional areas, we struggle to find people who are prepared to do a number of jobs, skilled and semi-skilled and even unskilled jobs, which is a great concern to us and to our rural and regional economies.
Now, also in your area of social services, encouraging assessment today that suggests that when we look to the future, that the country's welfare bill is becoming more affordable. The projections have been trimmed by 10%. What have you done? What has the coalition done that's been able to curtail the welfare bill?
Well, the most important thing is through a massive program of job creation, which has been enabled by a very strong economy. We've seen the lowest number of people on working age payments that we've seen for over 30 years. But one of the things that Scott Morrison actually did when he was the Minister for Social Services was to actually take a lifetime view of what the cost of our welfare and our social services bill is, and by focusing on the longer term changes that we need to make. So obviously reducing the number of people that are on welfare, but also making sure that when we get people off welfare, they're obviously better prepared to be able to look after themselves into their future, the introduction of superannuation guarantee. There are a number of factors in government policies that are playing into the lifetime cost reducing, which is a great thing for Australia, because the reality is that we need to make sure that our welfare system is sustainable into the future. We can't borrow off future generations to pay for today's welfare. So we're very encouraged by the results of the actions that have been taken over the long term or the lifetime of welfare assessment.
There's some big savings there too in the disability support pension. There have been a lot of measures put in place in recent years to try and clamp down on abuse of the disability support pension. Too many people, it was argued, who should have been on unemployment benefits getting onto the disability pension. Also, you've had the NDIS come in to try and encourage people to work if they possibly can. What do you think has been the key to that success? Is it a part of those clampdowns, if you like?
Well, one of the things that I think we clearly need to understand is just because you live with a disability doesn't mean to say that you can't participate in the workforce. You know, we have many people that live with quite profound disabilities that still work and enjoy the benefits of having a job and being involved in employment. So what the changes have done is have encouraged a lot of people to focus on the things that they can do, the contribution that they can make. And through the Disability Employment Service programs and a number of other programs that we have introduced are with people who have disability and to get them into the workforce. And we've seen some tremendous results, and you know, certainly meeting people who now are in the workforce who previously weren't, who live with a disability, and just seeing the satisfaction that they have is absolutely ample encouragement for us to continue to work on these particular programs.
Well, given you've presented with this very heartening forecast that shows you're going to save hundreds of billions of dollars in the decades to come from earlier forecasts, perhaps you can afford to increase the Newstart allowance.
Well, certainly one of the things that we are absolutely focused on is making sure that our payments and that our welfare are targeted to the people that need them. And part of the whole program that has led to these results has been a much more targeted approach to helping people deal not just with the safety net that Newstart provides for them, but to the job creation, the pathways to jobs. But the most exciting thing about these programs has been the programs that break down the barriers that people find to getting into employment. And there's so many of them, and they're often very different from cohort to cohort. And we've got a number of really exciting programs out there that will assist people to actually make that transition from unemployment into a job, because that's the only way that we can actually achieve long-term sustainable change in the lives of these people.
So you're not ruling out an increase in Newstart?
An increase in Newstart is certainly not on the books for the government, but what we are absolutely focused on is spending and investing in areas that will allow people to get off Newstart and into a job, because, as I said, we believe by providing those pathways and breaking down the barriers to employment, we give people the best possible chance to have a life that they aspire to.
I've just got to get your reaction, Senator Ruston, to what Geoffrey Kennett told us earlier today about a national water strategy. You're closely linked to the River Murray. I know you come from the Riverland and you understand all the pressures on the Murray-Darling Basin. Geoff Kennett says that governments for decades have been derelict in their duty when it comes to a national water strategy. He says there should be focus on a real nation-building plan to have a series of dams and water storage facilities and pipelines along the eastern seaboard so we can shift water around and use it to massively expand some of our agricultural produce. Is he right? Is there a sense that we've left too much of this up in the air and we need a national strategy to make the most of our water and agricultural resources?
Well, look, I'd say we do have a national strategy. The National Water Grid, which David Littleproud has recently announced, brings together a lot of different initiatives. You know, Barnaby Joyce, when he was the Agriculture Minister, came up with the National Water Infrastructure Fund, and bringing these all together to put in place.
But there can't be much of a strategy. It hasn't led to one dam being constructed in the last few decades, and I know a couple of small projects were announced on the weekend, but surely if we're going to continue to expand our population and our production, we need to expand the amount of water storage.
Look, absolutely, no doubt. But one of the great challenges that we have as a federal government is, we've put a lot of money on the table for water infrastructure. And so far, some governments, state governments, have just chosen to put every barrier in place that they possibly can so that water infrastructure isn't built. I mean, take it in case in point in Queensland. But in our home state, Chris, of South Australia, the federal government put $49 million on the table for the Northern Adelaide Plains Water Infrastructure Project, which will see 20 gigalitres of water recycled for the Northern Adelaide Plains for high impact horticulture. So there's a lot of things that are actually going on at the moment in terms of water infrastructure. The Murray-Darling Basin Plan itself is an investment in water infrastructure, but as the Prime Minister said yesterday in announcing that New South Wales was coming on board to build a new dam in New South Wales, other states, the money's on the table, stump up, help us, make sure that you assist us in being able to get that infrastructure built.
Thanks so much for joining us, Senator.
My pleasure. Thanks, Chris.